to elect in February 2021 if it wasn't for COVID-19. Nonetheless, welcome, and here is where we are today. Okay, ndugu Wakol, karibu. I'm happy to see you. Good morning.
Morning to you. The pleasure is mine joining you on this Pan-African Friday.
Okay, well, that's very important. We've had two events this week. The official funeral service of Papa Iteso, who will be buried tomorrow in Serere. And the other day we also had Janan Luwum Day, which is a public holiday. One or two comments?
Well, I must say that for the people in Teso, of course, I joined them in mourning Papa Iborumori and saying that may God rest him in peace, and of course wishing the people in Teso strength during this time that we are mourning our cultural leader.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Ndugu Cole Mande Amazima. Let me hear from Ndugu Mtuta here. Karibu.
Yeah, Santi. It has been, of course, like I said, two events that have been very key to Ugandans. The memorial for the late Archbishop Luwum, who was killed during the Amin era, and also now the death of
Papa
Iborumori. But also around the same time, we also saw the commemoration and tribute paid to the late
Father Simon Peter
Father
Lokodo. Simon Lokodo.
Yes.
I don't know why I like calling him Peter, because I think Simon normally goes with Peter.
Simon Peter. It's like George William.
Yeah, like George William. You feel Simon without Peter is actually incomplete.
Rosemary, you know those
Rosemary,
those
Simon Peter, George William.
Yeah. So we also saw that tribute made posthumously for him in Parliament. Because the body was not able to be brought in Parliament, I think, when it was brought in from outside.
Actually, many people didn't know that his body was flown back into the country and actually buried. Some were actually still asking whether Father Lokodo's body is still away from us. When is he going to be buried, etc., etc.
There is that, of course, thinking, and I don't know, because by the time he died, there were many other things happening at the same time. So his death was low-key, and even when the body was brought in, there was not this hype of... But also, it is also the type of life that Lokodo himself would have wished to live. He was not this bling-bling person. Okay. So I think that fits within what he would have wished to be treated even unto death, because he was not, even as a minister, he was not the guy who was known for a lot of publicity, although a lot of issues came around him. And we also saw that there was the national mourning for Papa, the late Iborumori of Teso. And I think tomorrow we'll be joining the other people from Teso and the other parts of the country in the burial at Serere.
And I think, yes, we really need to bereave with the family of the Iborumori, because just last year they lost a son. And they lost a son who succumbed to COVID sometime, I think, in November. Then I think the son had also lost a daughter. So the family has had these challenges during this period. So we need to really commit them in the hands of God to help them go through this period.
And I have also seen many of these cultural leaders go lately. Also,
lately, yes.
We lost ours.
The Mamas have lost yours.
The
Wagwere lost theirs. Ikumbania, George Chrysostom Moyabide.
Yes, some other person also died. And then we have Papa Iborumori.
Okay, so we also need to commiserate with the Uganda Kings and Cultural Leaders Forum, because that's now the forum or the ambit that brings all of them together. Welcome, Ndugu Rugarama, Chairman, Pan-African Movement, Uganda Chapter. Karibu.
Good morning, Ndugu Jagenda. Good morning, Comrade Akor and Mututa. And good morning to you all, our dear viewers who are always faithful to UBC TV. I take the same opportunity to extend my sincere sympathies to the family of Papa Emormor, but also the 18th community in Uganda and Kenya, and where he exercised the cultural jurisdiction. Oh yes.
South Sudan, Ethiopia, Kenya, Uganda.
I already thought about Uganda and Kenya, so you can imagine. So
they have a test in Ethiopia, even in South Sudan.
And he was exercising jurisdiction over them.
Yes, exactly.
No, the history of Teso actually, in Djibouti actually. Yes.
So you can imagine the amount of grieving and loss that we have had. So I want to use this opportunity to extend my deepest condolences to them, and also to thank the government of the Republic of Uganda for giving our cultural institutions the importance that they deserve, because we are as good as human beings, we are as good as our culture, our different cultures. Then finally, on the issue of it was Papa Emormor and
Janan Luwum.
Janan Luwum. I just want to make a comment about Archbishop Janan Luwum, that it is, when you look at the way he was murdered and what that tells about our political organization on the African continent, it speaks to the bankruptcy of the political leadership that we have had in the past. And therefore, it underscores the importance of organizing better our leadership, which informs the quality of life that we live across the board. The moment we take interest in what we call political hygiene, like Pierre Ormumba has already said.
Well, thank you very much. I've also been told we have our guest from the US, Ndugu Comrade KDOB Wadu, who is the Pan-African ambassador in the US. He's our Pan-African ambassador in the US. Let me see you if you are there. And good morning here in Kampala. I don't know what the time is where you are, but welcome. I know it's some time of the day. It's morning here in Kampala. Welcome, KD.
Greetings to all of my comrades there in the studio. It is night time here. We are 11 hours behind real people time, East African time. It's absolutely an honor to be invited once again with this esteemed panel on such critical topics of the day and of the Pan-African future.
Thank you so much. And of course, I'll beg that we start with you. Today, I want to look at a very important thing. And of course, you are one of the best persons to talk about this. We're looking at Africa's potential, Africa's agricultural potential in feeding the world. Now, there are lots of statistics that talk about Africa. One, and firstly, we have statistics that Africa has the world's arable land, which is about 60%. And this is all land that is not cultivated. Secondly, about 80% of Africans who do agriculture do it on very small pieces of land, and they are responsible for feeding another about 80% of the rest of Africans. And there's talk about the climate, talk about the soils, talk about all the things. You wrote a book here called The Blackest Soil, and you say Africa can feed the world. Let's get into these issues and really examine them. Do we have the potential to feed Africa and to feed the world? Welcome to the conversation today on our Pan-African Friday.
It's a pleasure to be with you. There has been a new narrative that has arisen since about 2010. We can see this becoming a more popular theme, and the theme is called Africa Rising, wherein it is the entire continent is rapidly transforming. I am particularly fond of the developments taking place across the East African community with the moves toward federation, integration of the economies, the arrival of an East African Union passport, and so many other things. I am putting my roots down as firmly as possible in cities like Kampala, Nairobi, Addis Ababa, and looking to expand from there. And actually engaging now, we have put together an investment group we call the African Future, and we have leased some 135 acres in the southwestern port of Uganda, south of Hoima. And we're very excited about the future that is moving forward. But to put the book in the largest context, according to my 40 years in agriculture, especially focusing on organic food production, I am convinced that the African continent, with a total of some 874 million hectares of arable land, 2.160 billion acres of arable land, of which it seems to be that only maybe 1 out of 8 acres of this grand total is actually currently being in cultivation, according to the Food and Agricultural Organization estimates, that Africa can feed the world with the total of 2.160 billion acres of land and feeding a population of mostly organic food to the tune of 2,000 calories per day per person. I believe that Africa has the capacity of feeding as many as 12.9 billion people. Currently, there are only 7.8 billion people on the planet. Africa can feed the world, but as I'm sure you all know and we'll be talking about today, Africa must take responsibility for feeding itself, its citizens, this healthy organic diet first. At present, it is still unfortunate that many African nations and the continent as a whole are still net food importers, when in actuality, we should be the greatest exporters of healthy, wholesome food of any region on the planet.
But now, just before I come back to studios here to also engage my panelists here, there are quite a number of things when we talk about Africa's potential in feeding, or Africa's potential to feed the world. Let me just bring you to what is happening on the continent. Now, in 2003, our heads of state sat in Maputo. And of course, they came up with what they call the Maputo Declaration, or the Maputo Protocol of 2003. And in that declaration, they said all our national budgets should at least contribute 10% to agriculture. This was reinforced in 2014 when we had our leaders again sit in Malabo in Equatorial Guinea to reinforce, to see how this can actually be enhanced. And of course, the idea was to ensure that we get a hunger-free continent by 2025. This is 2022, for heaven's sake. Now, when you look at all these dynamics and the realities in there, with the Africa today that we're talking about, do we have the capacity to actually do what the rest of the world sees us doing?
Okay, is that addressed to the members in the studio, or is that to myself? I'm sorry, I cannot see the panel from where I'm at.
Before I come back to the panel, it is you, sir. It is still you.
Oh, yes, absolutely. You know, we have seen some setbacks, some delays, some distractions to our very serious planning on these systems, on these orders. I often cite a quotation, I believe it occurred around 2017 by the head of the African Development Bank, Dr. Adesina Akinwumi Adesina, let me get that in the right order, where he said, the next generation of millionaires and billionaires from Africa will be farmers. We saw similar predictions coming out of World Food Organizations that predicted that the agriculture production from sub-Saharan Africa, or from the total of the continent of Africa, would be increasing from the years 2015 until 2030, growing from then $337 billion annual in production continent-wide to $1 trillion annually by the year 2030, an expansion of as much as $600 billion new dollars in agricultural productivity. But we've seen some setbacks. I don't think any of us would deny that the past 2 years of the global pandemic has hurt Africa's industrial production, agricultural production, and the use of its human capital to its greatest potential. Our key is to remain true to our original targets. And when these black swan events come up that cause major shifts in global affairs, economic affairs, international relations, we have to make sure that our priorities are not set aside. I've got put in a lot of work on how Africa could not only not be distracted by the pandemic and its myriad of interrelated affairs, but actually Africa could and should have been a primary beneficiary to its agricultural sectors, as well as traditional African medicine should have made a significant increase. Last point I'll make is, during the first year of this pandemic, it was estimated that traditional Chinese medicine grew from an annual production and commerce of from $175 billion a year in 2019, estimated by the end of 2020 to grow to $400 billion a year. We should have seen a similar growth in traditional African medicine. It did not happen. And I think we need to hold ourselves responsible for making sure that this transition does occur.
And also engage the panelists. You're welcome, Honorable Member of Parliament, Apollo Fono Yeri. Let me see, the mask is on. No, you're not the one. You look like Apollo Fono. Surprise. You look like Apollo Fono Yeri. Do you know him?
I like that.
I know him.
Have you met him?
No, but I know him.
But if somebody said you're a brother to him, then but I'm happy to have you.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
I hope you are not choosing any of the parents.
Let me start with you, Ndugum Tuta. Come to the conversation. Africa's potential.
You know, we have been talking about the African, the potential, and my grandmother one time talked about this potential and told my sisters that you know, there's one thing having a potential, but until that a man walks to you and tells you that you are beautiful, your beauty doesn't hold. Now, Africa potential, fine. Now, one thing I've liked about which has raised is the issue, when we talk about the issue of food, because it is estimated that in the next 20 years also, the population, the people, the community that will have food and enough of it will have the capacity to control the rest. Now, if Africans are going to have enough food, then they'll be able to, at one point, control the world in that order. Now, when you look at the way things are moving, and we have gotten this experience from this COVID period, and we talked about it sometime, that one of the remedies, one of the safety valves of Africa in this particular context of the COVID-19 was the availability of food. Because you could lock down a country and people still can go to their gardens and can get food. Now, in other countries where those gardens are in the supermarkets, the story is different. Now, that we're not looking at that as a benefit, especially Africans. I think that's something to celebrate, because you could even have locked this country, other than having other supplies, still we would have survived as even at the extreme as a community. And we are looking at health food. I was on this show again, we talked about how to eat healthy, and I think someone will one time come here to help us on that. I walked in one of the stores and bought chicken combos and French fries. And when you sit down to eat, you find that this chicken has been in this fridge for maybe a month or 2 or 3, and you are eating something that looks like chicken but tastes different. But because you have they put there this wheat flour and whatever, then you have to eat. Now, I have the pain to see the Africans, because I was eating this food outside of Africa. But when I look at Africans flocking some of these places to go and eat this food, which is now considered exotic, I wonder whether we are the ones who are less in understanding our own potential, or the influence that has been impacted on us has really taken us that far. But so far, Africa has the food. And you know, the food is also medicine. You are eating well, it means you will have less bouts of either whichever disease, and then you will even stay longer. And we have seen this happen with the Chinese and the Japanese. Now, the rest of the world has known that if it is true that in the next 20 or so years, people who are going to have food are going to have power, then that food is likely to be in Africa. And we have seen the Europeans, we have seen the Chinese, we have seen all these people moving into Africa and trying to get chunks of land and trying to cultivate the food that they will be able to feed with their communities. Now the African problem is we are looking at this, and for us we are excited about investment. But of course it is good to have investors. Can we not create African investors, especially in terms of producing this food?
Okay.
And we have agriculture as an industry. That's one of the industries. We have talked of this industry, and others are manufacturing cars, they don't eat them. Others are manufacturing clothes, the Asians don't eat them. Can't we also take this as our own factory and we manufacture food that is going to be eaten by the rest of the world? In other words, we shall have both the power to compete and bargain, but also secure our people back at home in terms of safety, in terms of health, because we have seen that even these foods that we are getting from elsewhere have come with complications and implications. So I think Africa, we have an advantage here, and we need to take a charge of it before finally we lose it.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Ndugu Pasco Osire, Apollo Fono's younger brother or elder brother. I just want to ensure that you become brothers, you and Apollo Yerio Fono, my member of parliament from Tororo. Tororo municipality, I think is a MP for Tororo municipality, Apollo Yerio Fono. You're welcome. I know you are a farmer from Omoro. And this is the same constituency where the Speaker, Jacob Lokorio Lanya, comes from. And I think he's your member of parliament. Before he becomes our Speaker, he is your member of parliament to start with. You are a farmer. Welcome to our conversation today. And of course, it is where we are looking at Africa's potential to feed the world. When we talk about this, are we talking about something that can be achieved when in Uganda, with this very good weather, with the very good seasons that we have, with the very good soils that we have, we still have people who go hungry without anything to eat, and we want to feed the rest of the world. The panelists you got online, a comrade from the US, Ndugu KD Wadu, he says Africa has capacity to feed 12.9 billion people. Now that means we'll feed everybody on the planet Earth here and even have surplus, because we don't even have 8 billion people in the world today. Let me hear from you. Welcome to the conversation, and let's have your take.
Thank you very much. It is a great topic. I can say that Africa has got everything to feed the world. But the biggest problem we have as Africans, we are enemies of our own selves and our own governments. Why do I say this? You know, we have gotten scenarios. As you said, I am a farmer. I grow things that go out for, I grow for export, but I do both local and international market. The challenge we have is that some of our brothers and sisters in Africa, they get shortchanged of money. And if you have a vision to achieve, and you are all saying that you are farmers, but you are not sharing the same vision, then we shall never feed even 10,000 people, maybe just within Uganda. But we have all the potential to feed the world. I don't know, maybe the West people are only using the brains. Because, for example, I can tell you, I grow chili. for export. But we got to know that some of the clients, some of our clients in the West, they receive things in good state, but thereafter they begin sending you videos of certain things that are brought in, and those things are not yours. So before we talk about feeding the world, do we have a voice that can be listened out there if we were to feed the world?
Yes.
Do we have the voice? Unless Africa stands and say, we must negotiate
Yes.
for what belongs to us.
True.
Look at medicines. From the days of our fathers, personally, I never took a Panadol. I don't know when I started taking Panadol, because we lived with the cultures of our fathers. Not every sickness is supposed to take you to the hospital, is supposed to take you to the pharmacy. Because the food that we eat has all the components that can destroy any kind of sickness in your body.
The medicinal properties.
Medicinal, exactly. Now, we talk about, I mean, when you go to the hospital, the doctor tells you that go and take this medicine. But there is one book I read one time that asks your doctor before he asks you. If I am suffering from just only a few vitamins and so on, why would somebody tell me, go and buy this drug and take? Why can't the doctor tell me, go and get foods that are rich in iron, zinc, and so on, and I get well? So, we have the potential as Africans. The only thing we need to do is to begin looking beyond ourselves, because that's where the problem is. If there is a conference today, I remember I was in the Netherlands. We had a Uganda-Netherlands business convention, and I asked a question: when those companies come to Africa, everything that they export is good. When an African company begins exporting these same things, they are bad. Why? So there are people that have been shortchanged, because once you speak one voice, it is not easy to to compromise you or to defeat you. So what happens is they want to bring in some other voices that can disorganize the organized voice. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Ndugu Rugarama, come to the conversation here. And of course, one of the things that we talk about with the rich soils, with everything that we possibly want to understand in as far as food production is concerned, in Africa, on the continent of Africa, you heard from Cade here when he says we have potential to actually feed the world on organics. Now, steadily, we are losing organics for some other thing called, I think, GMO or whatever that means. We are losing the organics. And everything that we need now, the exporter here and the farmer says, these are things that we need to appreciate, that our food should be our medicine. But the other challenge that we have on the continent is the land tenure systems. With the land tenure systems that we have, because statistics are very glaring and clear, that majority of the people who are actually into agriculture are only doing it at a subsistence level. We do not have many Pascos from Omoro who can actually get into Chile and find themselves in the Netherlands, in the UK, in the US, etc., etc. You'll only have one Pasco Sire here, you will have one Acol, you will have one KD, and we want to feed 12.9 billion people on the continent of Africa. Let me hear your take on especially the land systems that we have in Africa.
Let me first deal with the land question. The concept of leadership is not an end in itself. It is very critical for man to realize that leadership is what it is able to deliver to the population. Land distribution, land management is an aspect of leadership. If leadership, for instance, the political leadership, can address the issue of land usage, there would be no problem. That is where we have to go back to the concept of cooperatives. Let people come together and grow the food crops, the cash crops together, there would be no problem with the nature of land if the leadership, the political leadership, can guide the population on how to move into the issue of using this particular land. That, having said that, let me state to our population and the viewers listening, hearing us and viewing us, that we are talking about the potential of Africa. And my brother KD brought in our senior brother, the president of Africa Development Bank. I love that man. He's former minister of agriculture in Nigeria. Is he still on, by the way? But Head was complaining that he can hear us, he can't see us. I hope it is going to be sorted. The President Adishini noted, and I entirely agree with him, that one of the issues we must resolve as Africans on the African continent especially is attitude towards agriculture. Our perception towards agriculture is that one of, it's a way of life. What are you doing? No, I'm just doing some agriculture to grow some crops and eat and go away. They are not like my brother here, who is into a level, is at a level of commercial production. We need to look at agriculture, therefore, and take agriculture. If we must transform it from the potential that we are talking about to the actual, which Ndugu Mututa was trying to share with us here. The potential, we are aware, but now we need the actualization. How to transform the potential into the actual. This mass African continent can fit within her the entire China, the entire India, the entire United States of America. It will have space to fit in Argentina and maybe a few other countries here and there. What does that tell us? That on top of the proven statistics, there was a statement here that the arable land, 60%, it is actually 65%, 65% of the arable land on the globe is on the African continent. Now, there is no way we can still be having $30 billion spent annually by the African continent to import food. You see that dilemma? We can't afford that. That $30 billion is spent annually by the African continent to import food to feed her population.
Given to the people who have the least land for cultivating food.
Israel, for instance. Israel, the land is not fertile because Ndugu Jagenda, you brought in the concept of fertilizers. You said, yes, whereas I agree that we can get better yields, but we are not yet at a level where we desire to have fertilizers the way other places other than Africa want to fertilize their land. We had a very growing example in the late, may his soul rest in eternal peace, Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, where he turned a desert into a green belt. And agriculture was doing very well there. There was no longer shortage of water. Therefore, the point I'm trying to make is that the moment we adjust our attitude from looking at agriculture as just the way of life and getting by, and we will focus to look at it as a business, we are going to get greater dividends as far as agriculture is concerned. And probably, I should also not forget that our banking sector, we do not have in other economies. When I was in China not long ago, their banks. There is the Agriculture Bank of China, specialized in lending to people engaged in agriculture. We cannot, therefore, as an African continent, whose population is well over 78 to 80% living on agriculture, fail to have specialized bank to lend to the sector where we actually have got an advantage, a cooperative advantage. It would be shooting ourselves in the foot. I want also to add that if the projections are that by 2030, African continent would have increased by population by about 1 billion people, and that by around 2025 to 30, around there, the projection is that we shall be having agriculture as a sector operating in $1 trillion. Now, that is why, and I think Ndugu Akedi, I will just repeat what he said, because it is a fact that was stated by President Adeshini, the African Development Bank, the records are there, that if you want to be a billionaire on the African continent, you must therefore, as one of the quickest and most profitable areas of investment, engage in agriculture. It is my contention, as I summarize on this, that Africa needs to look at her fight Monsanto, the Monsantos, you are talking about them. The Monsantos are fighting to make sure that they reintroduce their seeds, and when somebody controls your seeds, then he has controlled the entire livelihood, and it becomes a very big problem. Two, Africa needs to look at her planting, how we plant. First of all, what we plant. We must have the ability to have our seeds. After having our seeds, which can reproduce, we must be able, therefore, to have quality seeds and also to have soils which we have ascertained that these types of seeds are going to do very well. We must also, Africa must also make sure that we do not introduce pesticides, because we are into a habit of using chemicals which are harmful. And that is why they say we cannot meet standards, European standards, for heaven's sake. They should be meeting our standards, because we have got all it takes to have the organic and best foods. Okay. Also, finally, on that, we need to look at the post-harvest.
Post-harvest handling is actually one of the issues.
Yes, because those are the issues which raise the aflatoxics. We were having problems
with Kenya.
Even when Kenya, I think that there was much more that the aflatoxins the ordinary eye could meet, see. Because our aflatoxics levels are below 10%, and theirs have been constantly been above 23%.
Okay.
So I want to say, therefore, that this is a very beautiful topic, but there are certain things we must do, some that we have enumerated, which will catapult Africa from talking about potential to actual.
Okay. I called just before you come in. I want the producer to play for you this video of Deputy President of Kenya, Dr. William Samoei Ruto, who on one of his campaign trails actually made these statements about the neighbors of the Democratic Republic of Congo, still, which is looking for market for agricultural produce. Producer, if you're ready with that video of Dr. Ruto, let's hear it, let's hear it.
3 billion liters. Na tuko na soko kuanzia hapa DRC, hao watu wako na 90 million people, hawana ng'ombe moja. Hii DRC watu ya kuimba hii. Hii watu ya sijana kwanda bongoma nani hawa wa kuimba. Na wanafunga suruali wanafungia hapa. Hiyo watu twende tuwauzie maziwa. Si ndio? 90 million wako hapo, wengine hapo Congo Brazzaville, wengine hiyo Central Africa yote hiyo mpaka West Africa tunaweza kuwauzia maziwa, kwa sababu saizi wananunua maziwa kutoka Australia, New Zealand, sijui wapi. Na hiyo ni soko yetu ya Afrika. Na tuko na mkataba ya yenye inatupatia ruhusa ya kuuzia hawa. Inaitwa Africa Continental Free Trade Area, ambayo Kenya ilikuwa number 1 kusign. So we have the mechanism to be able to sell. Hata tukiuza lita bilioni 3 peke yake kwa hii soko yetu ya Afrika, we will be collecting approximately between 200 and 300 billion shillings every year. In fact, milk will overtake all the exports we have in horticulture, in tea, and in coffee, if we just do it right. So, wakati mnasikia ule mama Lucy akisema, that is correct. Na hiyo ndio mpango sisi tumepanga na kundi letu hapa. Jambo la tano ambayo nimesikia.
Well, I think jambo zile ambao is what I wanted. Hii jambo lengine taiwacha, but I was very interested in that particular. I call come to the conversation. Now that's the Deputy President of Kenya. He's talking about the market that we have, and it surprises him that our neighbors in DRC actually go to New Zealand, they go to Australia, they go to where? I have personally had an opportunity to actually go to those countries. I've been to Australia, I have been to New Zealand, and when you look at New Zealand, it's as green as Uganda. Amazingly, the population in New Zealand is much different from the population in Uganda. But yet again, when I was trying to find out, they told me they have over 50 million sheep, I think. Over 50 million sheep in the country. Now, they have more sheep than the people, you know. And you could drive through farms and look at all these things. Now, it doesn't surprise me that they can actually sell milk again to us. With all this land, DRC has all this very big land, they have all this very good weather, they have all these very good natural forests, etc. Why would New Zealand come to sell to us milk?
Well, thank you very much. You know, that particular clip of Dr. William Ruto, I think, rubbed some Congolese.
Yes, of course. I didn't want to get into that diplomatic issues.
And indeed, I also did say that they overreacted, because really his point is very, very, very clear. Now, you've come up with New Zealand and Australia. I think their biggest asset are their laws in as far as the land tenure system is concerned. Because now here, like President Museveni has always said, we are fragmenting the land, over-fragmenting the land, whereas would actually come up with planned settlements, and maybe the rest are now used as for farming and the rest. So I think we really need to get back on the drawing board so that we can have enough land for agriculture, other than fragmenting the land, building unnecessarily where you're not supposed to be building.
Can we redeem that? Because yes, all the land has been dealt with. Is anything there to redeem?
Yes, yes. It's never too late to do the right thing, as long as you have a leadership that can whip the people, can direct them towards that can be achieved. Now, the other issue that I also feel that is a problem here in Africa is our inferiority complex. Now, you've talked about Congo. I've been to Congo a number of times. I also own land on the other side of Congo. But you know one thing, in Congo, they believe in things that come from abroad. Yes, I think because of the assimilation points of the French. They believe in things that come from abroad. And that is actually a serious challenge. Yes, this is a serious challenge. Even in other countries in Africa, that even our leaders would prefer importing rice from Pakistan rather than perhaps empowering the rice schemes we have in the country or in the region. Kenya would prefer importing sugar instead of buying sugar from Uganda. So these are some of the things that we have the question of inferiority complex, cherishing things that come from abroad at the expense of actually getting into our own and developing it. Then lastly, the issue of also water.
Azakele plan to ask a question to
Yes,
KD
yes,
about the water
yes,
wars especially.
Yeah, because the issue of water. Now, Africa is one of those countries that has the freshest, places that has the freshest water. We have rainfall that gives us very good fresh water, but also our water bodies. But interestingly, even how to manage our water is becoming an issue. How to manage the water is also becoming an issue. We have no plans for water harvesting. Now, in places like Karamoja, there will be a lot of rain. That water is wasted. It ends up even demolishing bridges. But again, after like a month or two, there will be famine, drought. Why? The water was totally wasted. It's the same thing with Turkana in Kenya. So these are some of the things that the River Nile. What are we, other than Ethiopia and Egypt,
Fighting over it.
What are they doing? So that they can say, look here, how do we utilize this water for purposes of helping us? Now,
in Sudan because they can't control it.
the same thing now. River Congo. River Congo, actually, you're talking about DRC. River Congo. At one time, there was a project that had been funded by Egypt. That was River Congo was meant to supply to come out to construct a dam that was meant to supply electricity to the whole of
Ingo dams.
Yes, the whole of Africa. So we have these water. Fresh waters that we can use for irrigation, so that we don't now, Africa, we don't become slaves to seasons, that our agriculture is dependent on what? On God's mercy. That when it is a rainy season, that's when we'll go to do this. When it is this, then the other aspect, like my brother Sire, back home in Teso, the granaries. And you comes in with the issue of
the silos,
the
post-harvest handling.
How do you see, you find somebody a very good harvest, they take the best to the market. Within a month, they have nothing at all. So now, how do we all that? And this brings us now to the issue of cooperatives. That the best way you can develop Africa in terms of agriculture is having well-organized, facilitated cooperative societies. Yes, because I don't know why in Uganda and other African countries we fail to grasp this, because we keep changing names from SACCO to Emyoga to what, but the bottom line is cooperatives, bringing people together to cooperate. So the earlier we realize that we need these cooperatives, we entrench cooperative education right from primary, so that people can know how to cooperate and work together through that. Because now, like Pascal was talking about collective bargaining, that is how exporters. How many are you, so that you can come together, exporters in Uganda, exporters in Kenya, exporters, so that now, by the time you go to world market, you're going with a single what?
I can give you information on that, just a small one. The concept of cooperatives was deemed socialist and fought by capitalism. Even up to now, the reintroduction of cooperative unions on the African continent is still looked at by capitalism as a way of going socialism.
Okay, well, Katie, come back to the conversation. And one of the things that I want you to talk to us here about is when we talk about the fourth industrial revolution, we talk about all those other things. And we also notice now that food is one of the factors that is going to drive the world in the coming years. But some of the things that we need to appreciate here is we also need to talk about soil health. We've been told that our soils are actually now old, and I think that's why we are bringing in a new thing, inputs now of fertilizers and quite a number of things to enhance the soil. We've been convinced that our soil is old, so there is that factor of our soil health. But the other thing also is about the access to agricultural inputs, because this is one of the things that many farmers complain or talk about, that they do not have access to inputs. And of course, put it together with what Ndugu Akolia talks about, the water and irrigation. One of the next wars that we anticipate will be called water wars. We've already seen that partly the crisis in Ethiopia is also fueled by that project called the GAD. And of course, it's a fight of sovereignties or powers over waters. And now these are some of the things that we're trying to grapple with. How do we harmonize all these to actually, like Comrade Rugarama here says, let's not talk about the potential, let this potential be seen to happen and to really help us.
I've been listening to all the members of the panel making some very profound statements, taking copious notes. I wish I could comment on everything because I'm really excited about these conversations. I have written extensively about sustainable development for Africa. Let me just address a couple of those points. When you talk about water wars being a serious issue of the present and foreseeable future, you're absolutely correct. Let's look at the Lake Chad region, a lake shared by Cameroon, Niger, Chad, I believe Mali, as well as Nigeria. And the amount of conflict we see in that region. Many of us don't associate the fact that since the early 1960s, Lake Chad has shrunk by up to 90%, 95%, whereas the population of the region has grown. The shrinking of the lake literally wipes out whole sectors of industries, therefore stranding a significant number of young men in the population with no source of income, only to be seduced with a Kalashnikov, a few francs every month in income. And now you have created more of these terrorist-leaning militia groups exploiting the populations because of the lack of an infrastructure for income. I've made a few notes, and I think these are very important. I hear much talk about, and it's very important that we do talk about, the extension of the food value chain. According to the research I put in my book, The Blackest Soil Africa Can Feed the World, it's very critical that we don't just focus on one or two aspects of agriculture. It is the entirety of the 10-point food value chain that we must focus on. These include multiple inputs, including lending for support of the farmers at the beginning of the season, production, all of the aspects of production from seed banking, seed acquisition to distribution. There are the primary frontline handlers of the process, people engaging in the agriculture, the manufacturers and processors, wholesale and logistics handlers, aggregators, after the crops are grown on various farms. Who is the one that then aggregates all of the crops grown in a certain area and is able to store them safely so that we as African people begin to solve one of the biggest problems with agriculture in Africa is that as much as 30% of our produce spoils before it gets to market. And when we're talking about $100 billion annually in food spoilage, well, if we set up systems just to reduce that by 1/2, say by the end of the decade, that's $50 billion more that can be input back into the top of the thing and make all aspects of the food value chain work. So the food value chain includes industrial buyers, food and beverage services, retail stores, food banks, as well as the end users, the consumers. So there was also a point that was made, and I think this is very important, is that as we accomplish our goals of feeding ourselves first and then making our food, our surplus available for international trade, it's very important that we should do so. We have to also make sure that the food that we produce is not valued outside of the African continent, as currently has been the situation for many years with cocoa. Nations like Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana and others growing the world's finest cocoa crops, but the cocoa crops are valued in Europe and in London and in New York and other places. Meanwhile, they sell the finished products in the form of consumable chocolate. They sell it back to us, and it's far out of the perspective of fair exchange. The same is true with coffee and tea and other major African exports. We're going to have to set up our own indigenous systems for evaluating the quality of our food. So our certified organic crops should not be certified by European or other Western agencies. They should be certified by African agencies on African soil. And that's one of the major plans that I have. I literally want to create as many as 12 different laboratories across, beginning with the East African community, but spreading across the continent, to be able to certify the quality of our food according to standards that are accepted all over the world. Why not us? Couple of more points. And again, I've written multiple books on this topic, so bear with me because I really get excited talking about these things. The impact of the African Continental Free Trade Area is now, it's in its second year of implementation, and it is a major driver of self-sufficiency for African entities, for African institutions, international trade, the movement of labor, all of these things, the mechanisms, the facilities, the processes are being put into place at an ever more rapid pace. And so I think it's critical that we all embrace the AFCFTA and ask the question, what can we do to input more into it? We looking at the organizing the diaspora, and this is one of my primary principal functions, organizing the diaspora into foreign direct investment into all of the processes of what we call Africa Rising. And there can be no more important sectors than healthcare, food self-sufficiency, the establishment of light and medium industries, of which could be heavily engaged and involved in agroeconomics, as well as the establishment of education facilities and the provision of the fourth, well, I think we're at the third industrial revolution where Africa needs to consolidate before we start thinking about the fourth industrial revolution. Because from someone living in the West, the fourth industrial revolution, the greatest fear there is artificial intelligence displacing so many people out of careers that have supported middle-class families for generations. Africa does not need to follow that fourth industrial revolution, but we do need to consolidate the technology necessary for us to bring our own natural resources into a sustainable level of production that engages all aspects of the population. I'm going to close with just the last point that you make, and I think it was a wonderful point about how do we handle the fertilizer issue? Because in the 20th century, they had the so-called Green Revolution, which was using chemical-based agricultural inputs to a greater and greater extent. They fed a lot more people, and then they burned out the soil. And in the case of India, they burned out the farmers to where they're now using those same chemical farm inputs to commit suicide. Africa cannot and will not follow that model. I want to share one paragraph and then turn it back to the panel. One of the most effective methods of assuring soil nutrition and maximizing plant species natural protection against pest threats is by fully activating the spectrum of healthy microorganisms that inhabit the soil topography. Organic farming techniques provide the best means of counteracting long-term soil degradation caused by chemical fertilizers and pesticide usage. I have so much more to say, but I'm eager always to hear what you all have to say.
Okay, thank you very much. And just before I again come back to studios, when you look at SDG 1, 2, and 3, to me, they work hand in hand. We talk about no poverty, we talk about zero hunger, we're talking about good health and well-being, the three SDGs. But yet again, you will agree with me that when somebody is painting a picture about Africa or Africa, they will need to show you malnourished children. They will need to show you a woman with so many children that they cannot feed. They will need to show you some hungry, stricken human beings to portray the image of Africa. And this is the land that we talk about that has all these very good and nice things that we talk about here. But to also just bring it back home, do we have the will to actually ensure that we focus onto that? Because when you look at all our budgets, now you talk about access to many of these things, but you also notice that except I think in Ghana, where we have the Africa Development, the Agriculture Development Bank, I think there is one in Ghana that is led by Dr. Kofi Mensah. I think Dr. Kofi Mensah in Ghana. But do we have on the continent that capacity to actually say we will put a lot of our focus onto funding for agriculture to make sure that when our people get into agriculture, we will help them get out of poverty. When our people get into agriculture, we will help fight hunger. And when our people get into agriculture, it will also help us to achieve SDG 3, which is good health and well-being. Can we do that?
Yes. Yet, we will have to make some substantial changes and transformations in our current policies that we are engaging. We have to always keep in context that we are really witnessing about the third generation and entering the fourth generation of African leadership post-colonialism. Now, the first generation of leadership, these brilliant visionaries from Kwame Nkrumah to Kenneth Kaunda and Gamal Abdel Nasser and Sekou Touré, so many others. I dare not attempt to call all of their names. That'll be the rest of the program. These profound visionaries did the very best they could, inheriting these fragmented peoples and nations that were created out of disparate peoples. The second generation of African leadership, all too often, were military strongmen who had the power to overthrow a government, but did not have the insight and experience outside of their colonial handlers, who many times were sponsoring these coups d'etats. They couldn't run things. But now we're seeing this third generation of leaders coming into place who are setting up infrastructure and systems. We can see them. And I want to salute His Excellency President Museveni, who is really one of these second generation moving into third generation leaders. But we're going to have to keep producing this third generation of African leadership. People like Paul Kagame, people like Abiy Ahmed from Ethiopia, people all over the continent. John Magufuli, praise be his eternal name, was one of the greatest visionaries, highly educated men to arise on the African continent with a very clear vision. We had so many of these. Now we've got to prepare the fourth and the fifth generation of African leadership. And they're going to have an education comparable to the highest level of education of anywhere on the planet. I'm proud to say, although I've never formally enrolled in colleges and universities, I've lectured at many of the major universities in this country and other countries, and I consider myself to be the equivalent of someone who has multiple doctorates across the various fields that I have published some 43 books on. So we can do it. We have the vision, we have the will, we have the talent, we have the skills. Nature itself, history itself, is on our side. We have the demographic advantage and the fastest growing middle class of any region on the planet. Can we do it? Yes, we can. Let's prove the world that we are true to our own vision, our own desire of self-determination, what we call kujichagulia.
How I wish everybody would have the passion that you have for this continent of Africa. You're so passionate about these things, and we thank you so much. We're still with you. Let me just come back to studios here and hear from Ndugu Osire here, the farmer and also exporter from Omoro. Ndugu Osire, you are into this thing, but you know very well that we talk about agriculture. Now, just this week, I think on the 15th, yes, when we were paying our last respects to Papa Morimor, the Minister of Local Governments, the Honorable Rafael Majezi, was also tabling the launching of the parish development model before Parliament. And of course, we are now looking at the parish development model is hinged on about 7 or 8 pillars, which of course the idea in there is basically agriculture when you look at it. But let's get to the realities. You are an exporter, you are a farmer, but we know that it's actually very expensive to get into agriculture. We normally push people into getting to these things, but somebody will tell you to cultivate an acre of a chili or an acre of that, or 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 acres of a coffee to be able to produce for the market, and not a chida chonka that President Museveni talks about. You notice that we do not have very many households that actually have the capacity to do that. Now that brings me to another issue here of access to the market, but also access to financial services.
Thank you very much. There is one question that I keep on asking myself every day,
Jim.
every night. Do we have a will? Do the leadership has a will to get out people from poverty through agriculture? I am not that so old, but I remember in Teso there was a presidential something, there was a kind of money. Then again there was a Tandikwa. There comes there are quite a number of them, and now we have a Myoga. Now from a Myoga we have this parish something model. The question therefore, how much money is government putting in there?
In these initiatives?
In this initiative. In Acholi where I am, I come from Teso, but I am in Acholi. That's why I got land there, and we are doing well there. I can tell you, one of the greatest problems I have met there is to change the mindset of people. I have also discussed with the leaders. Actually, one point I was telling the chairman LC5, I don't know which approach you are going to use. Because people can see you doing the thing. When I tell them that tomorrow we are going to harvest the chili, I can even get 100 people. But when I tell them that, guys, why don't you also grow? When I am sending mine, you also send yours. We get the same money. There are people even who took seeds, they put them in the nursery beds, but none of them even transplanted one. Now, we are talking about a parish model. When I take you back to the NADS program, when NADS started, things were okay. They made people to grow a lot of mangoes, a lot of oranges. Where is the market? Where is the market? Everything gets abandoned there. Yesterday I was watching news looking about this Teso or something.
Fruit factory.
I can tell you, when I heard about that, I felt like crying. Because people had grown mangoes in Teso, but when time for the factory, the factory started working, people have mangoes, but they are not buying those mangoes. They have given people contracts, and they are sourcing mangoes from other areas.
Not Teso again?
Not Teso. Not Teso.
Who is in charge there?
Now, those are the questions that we must ask ourselves. That's why I told you that the problem we have, we do not need to blame anybody for Africans' problem or Uganda. We have to blame ourselves. When I have listened very carefully to our guest there online, the problem we have, let's talk about the chemicals that we use. Do you know when we talk about the counterfeits in these chemicals, they are produced here in Uganda. They are not exporting, they are not importing them, they are not coming from far. Where? If, for example, if Uganda Crop Care Center has a chemical that can help you to deal with some bacteria in the plants, there are people who will make sure that they will also do the same thing and gives you a wrong one. So instead of that chemical to do a right thing in your crop, it destroys the crop. So now who is the enemy of Africa? Ourselves. Because we have too much urge for money. Then when we talk about, does government have a will? One of the weakest point where we have gone is that because we have looked too much in politics, we need to sort out our homes, our houses. First, let's talk about Uganda. And then we can go to Africa. Uganda needs to clean up its own house first, before we begin talking about markets outside Uganda. So what am I talking about? You know, one of the greatest enemy in an economy, a nation, families, is sickness and disease. Simple. Because when you look at it down there, even as ourselves, ask yourself, how much money do you spend paying hospital bills? These hospital bills, if only we had focused on doing what we are supposed to do, eat well, I mean balanced diets, have this, then we could have minimized that completely. But these big guys, the guys of these big pharmaceuticals and so on, do you think they will allow you to do that? Who forced us to bring these so-called, they call the GMOs?
The GMOs.
Who forced us to bring them?
Monsanto.
And who was in charge in Uganda?
We have leaders. At
Yes, exactly, we are leaders.
We have leaders at all levels.
In Teso, we used to have a cassava that was, they used to call it Buanatera. Ateran is a woman, a newly married woman. So they call it Buanateraka, meaning that this cassava has to, you know, take care of this woman process by process. It will take even, yes, it takes 4 to 5 years. The cassava will never rot in the garden.
Do we still have it?
We don't have it.
The Buanateraka?
We don't have it.
No seedlings, no
No,
nothing.
you can't find
No
it.
seedlings even?
Yes, you can't.
It's dangerous.
We had a very good sweet potatoes.
The ones that we used for making amkeke?
Yes, but it is no longer there. Today, the cassava that they have brought, they are saying the scientists of art, specialists of art, I don't know. I don't even understand that. They brought things that wrote in 6 months, you cannot keep, you can't keep. I mean, you can't keep the cassava in the garden. Now tell me how you are going to fight a hunger. How? When you talk about food security, what were we talking about? Can you talk about food security with the cassava that rots in the garden in 6 months? Because this one, you plant the cassava, you eat it throughout the dry season, then it comes to the rainy season, the next season again you are eating the same cassava. Your only challenge is the source. But remember, in Teso we used to have granaries. So in those granaries, we used to keep granules there, we keep sorghum there, we keep rice there, we keep millet there. We could lack nothing. We had the cows, milk is there. Personally, I used to, these days I don't take milk. I don't know how long I last took milk, because we used to take milk directly from the cow.
Suckling the cow itself.
Kabisa, direct.
But,
and when
but,
I'm
but
taking,
you're taking
exactly, and
genetically modified
very
milk
healthy
from somewhere.
Yes,
Thank
but
you.
the milk of today, the milk of today, when moment
No,
you make that mistake,
I and you will have to go to Teso, and we try to find whether we still have seedlings of Buanateraka. I think we need to find it.
It's important.
We need to find it.
Up, yeah.
There was that research station at, I think it's in Ngora.
they are not there.
Golan, the Gola.
They are not there.
Even at Gola.
They are not there.
Okay.
Those are the same people who bring these fake things of theirs.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, you are a farmer. Ndugu Mtuta, Osire made a very clear point here, and he talked about something called mindset. He says he's in an area where mindset is very important. Now, our parish development model, which is also intended to help us achieve this, when you hear from KD speaking to us, he actually belongs to all these generations, but his mind is from the minds of the Kwame Nkrumahs, the Sekou Touré's, the Patrice Emelie Lumumba, the Sankaras, and all the others, and he comes into this other generation of the Yoweri Kaguta Museveni's and the others, and of course he's slipping into the third generation with his that very good mindset. Now, when it comes to the mindset today that we have, we keep talking about these things. You notice that the leaders of this generation are actually again taking us back to where Kwame Nkrumah pulled us from. They're taking us back to where the Nyereres got us from. They're taking us back to where the Musevenis are fighting to get us from. Let's talk about mindset. Whose mindset are we talking about? Is it the mindset of the farmers, the population, or even the leaders themselves? Let's talk about mindset.
Actually, there was last time a question saying that we need to have Ugandans trained into mindset. Now, but the other question comes in, who is going to train who? You are assuming that there is a group of people who have the right mindset and others who need their mindset worked on. Now, what is putting across is very important. But as we also go for this parish model, the first most important thing is to have a clear mindset on what we need to achieve through this, because unless that is done, then the money which is going to be taken out there is going to go the same fate the Ntandikwa had, all these other programs that followed have had. But the mindset is across the board, because even as we were starting, we were saying that people know that the most lucrative business in future from now is going to be farming, and that farming means it's going to impact many other people in terms of food security and health. Okay. So if we can now not focus our mindset on that, that's a country. First of all, we need to have a national mindset. Then also we can go down to the individual mindset. So the issue of mindset, I think, cannot even be exhausted in this debate today. We can have time to look at that, but the most important thing is to have the right thinking for the right reasons.
Okay. Katie, because it's night where you are, we are cutting this broadcast short here. We're going to go to another meeting that is happening, and it's of course also about agriculture, and it's talking about sharing organic agriculture knowledge and experiences. It's coming from somewhere. Katie, in just 30 seconds, say goodbye to us before we leave studios.
I want to thank you for this opportunity to once again be on this brilliant station, UBC, where we inform, inspire, and excite the people to their greatest potential. As you know, this topic, I keep this very dear to my heart. I look forward to being in your presence. I salute my dear brother, Rugarama, for all that he brings to my life, and he's a wonderful inspiration for me. I am Ugandan. I am Kenyan. I am East African. I am a Pan-African. I am self-declared Ubuntu. I am because you are.
Dugu KD, word just right there, and I think we'll cut this short. We go to now in Nigeria, where we'll be bringing you the KCOA, I Care Farmers Caravan 2020. It's just happening right now at Nigeria, and of course, sharing organic agriculture knowledge and experience. We'll stop our broadcast here today, and of course, it is just an addendum to what we've been saying. Thank you, gentlemen. Cole Rugarama, thank you so much, Ndugu Osire and Mutucha. We'll stop it here for today. Wishing you all the best. We'll return next week on Friday for Pan African Friday, and we continue the conversation. Bye, KD. Bye, everybody. Good morning and blessings.
Sorry, members. As we're waiting for the live team, I would like to recognize the presence of our chairperson for the National Steering Committee on Ecological Organic Agriculture Initiative. John, you're very much welcome. And today he's also representing or wearing the shoes of the commissioner for crop production, Mr. Alex Rakoba. Thank you so much for honoring our invite. And we thank you for working with us this journey as the Minister of Agriculture, Animal Industry and Fisheries. I would like to sincerely welcome all of us today as we are climaxing the 5-day caravan under the Knowledge Center on Organic Agriculture, but specifically on the Knowledge Hub for Eastern Africa. This has been a 5-day event that entailed a lot of field practicals in terms of sharing knowledge with different stakeholders within the organic fraternity. As members within the Knowledge Hub in Eastern Africa, we've been privileged to access different practitioners and farms and